Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Jeanelle Slade.
And I'm Russ. The U.S. Supreme Court handing down two big decisions today for Montana.
The first says the state cannot move forward and prosecute a cold case rape suspect from 1987. Ronald Tipton is accused of raping an 8-year-old Billings girl. Last fall, the Montana Supreme Court unanimously decided to drop the charges against Tipton. Montana Attorney General Tim Fox was hoping to overturn a 2003 Montana law that forbids filing rape charges after the statute of limitations has expired.
Tipton was charged with rape after he was arrested in 2014 on an unrelated charge, and his DNA matched the Billings child rape case. Tipton appealed the charges, and the Montana Supreme Court agreed, citing the statute of limitations. In this case, the statute ended in 2001, 5 years after the victim turned 18. Now, Attorney General Fox reached out to the victim today and thanked her for her bravery in coming forward, saying it paved the way for other victims of abuse.
There's only about 5% of the cases that come before the Supreme Court are actually accepted. So in the back of our minds, we knew that this was an uphill battle, but we think strongly that, again, the law needs to catch up with the science. And when children are raped and the DNA evidence identifies a suspect, we believe the law should provide for the ability to take that suspect to trial.
Now, another man, Jimmy Ray Bromgard, was convicted and served 15 years in prison for this crime, but he was released in 2002 after DNA evidence proved he didn't do it.
Montana's law requiring that those spending money on elections disclose where those funds are coming from won a major battle today. The U.S. Supreme Court upholding the constitutionality of Montana's Disclose Act, denying an appeal by a group called Montanans for Community Development. Montanans for Community Development sued after the Disclose Act was passed in 2015, arguing the new law was an unconstitutional restriction and burden on their right to free speech. The appeal going all the way to the Supreme Court, which denied MCD's argument that only major purpose groups could be required to disclose to Montanans who was trying to influence their votes. Governor Bullock worked with both Democrat and Republican lawmakers to help pass the Disclose Act in 2015.
Billings voters have said no to the three Billings high schools since 2007, when the last operational mill levy passed. Over 10 years since the high schools have seen any kind of upgrade in books, tablets, or online tools. School District 2 Superintendent Greg Upham says now it's time. A levy would raise taxes up to $10 a year for homes valued at $200,000, which Upham says would allow the district to keep pace with other high schools in neighboring cities. He tells Q2 most of the resources are online, which is where a good chunk of that money would go.
We do buy classroom sets of textbooks for those students who don't have access to technology at home, but the tablets are replacing the actual textbooks. So the costs are very similar. The licensing needs to be updated. We just haven't been able to keep pace with what I would consider a healthy cycle of curriculum adoptions. This allows us to go after the funding that's there under the funding support system for schools. That if we're successful in passing the levy, that upwards of $1 million for high schools.
Now, Upham told us the money would also go toward workplace coordinators in the high schools. Those would help with a district initiative to get students thinking about and actually taking part in potential careers while in high school.
A coal-fired power plant in Sydney will see the end of the road at the end of 2020, or, depending on the Westmoreland coal bankruptcy case, even possibly sooner. Montana Dakota Utilities says it's planning to close the station in Sydney and two other units in North Dakota. The company cited rising costs and increasing competition from natural gas and newer wind farms. The plant is supplied by the nearby Savage Mine, which is also caught up in Westmoreland's $1.4 billion bankruptcy case. MDU officials say the plants have served their communities well over the years, but they're now getting too expensive to operate. MDU is planning on starting a natural gas-fired plant to capitalize on the fracking in Bakken.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders has thrown his hat into the ring for president, joining a crowded Democratic field. Now, this isn't the first time around, of course. Here's video from his rally in Billings back in May of 2017. In the Democratic primary, Sanders actually beat out Hillary Clinton by 7% here in Montana.
Well, Sanders sat down with CBS This Morning's John Dickerson to explain why he thinks he'll win this time around.
Nicole Killian reports from Capitol Hill.
Bernie Sanders has made it official.
I'm Bernie Sanders. I'm running for president.
The independent senator from Vermont says his 2020 campaign for president will be a continuation of his 2016 run, when he mounted a significant challenge to the Democratic establishment.
In 2016, many of the ideas that I talked about, all of those ideas and many more, are now part of the political mainstream.
In an interview with CBS This Morning's John Dickerson, the 77-year-old progressive says he's okay if people call him a radical.
I believe that people are inherently entitled to health care. I believe people are entitled to get the best education they can.
Sanders becomes the 10th candidate officially vying for the Democratic nomination. Fellow Senators Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, and Elizabeth Warren have all launched campaigns. Sanders says he considers many of his competitors here in the Senate as friends, but it remains to be seen whether he can stand out in such a crowded field of candidates.
Personally, I think he missed his time, but I like Bernie.
President Trump weighed in on Sanders' announcement, saying he even believes they share some views.
You know, on trade, he sort of would agree on trade. I'm being very tough on trade. He was tough on trade. The problem is he doesn't know what to do about it. We're doing something very spectacular on trade.
Sanders has long been a critic of NAFTA and trade deals with China. Nicole Killian, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Well, if he should win, Bernie Sanders would be the oldest elected president. He would be 79 when he takes office.
Turning to weather, Bob, it feels like it's been forever since we've seen above freezing.
Yeah, I feel like I'm 79 because it's so cold. Yeah, we kind of took a look back and see how are we doing in February. It's been a while. Let me show you. We got all of the dates here through today, through the 19th. And as you'll notice, first 2 days of the month were great. We were in the 50s. It felt pretty good. Then after that, every other temperature has dropped down below normal up until about maybe a couple of days before Valentine's Day. Then we finally got up to 39 on the 12th, 41 on Wednesday the 13th, and then all of a sudden we're cooling back down below freezing again. So basically we had 16 days that were below normal, 1 day that was normal, and only 2 days that were above normal for a month of February. In fact, we only had 4 days that were actually above 32 degrees. So it's been an interesting month, a cold one now. It looks like we're set for another cold wave moving in next week. We'll have more of that coming up in a few minutes.
Interesting is a great word. Thanks, Bob.
Well, a newly renovated wing at St. Vincent Healthcare aimed at making treatment easier and more comfortable for the hospital's littlest patients is up and running.
Today, doors officially open for the new pediatric intensive care unit. Before the updates, the PICU was just one room with a sheet to separate each patient. Now each patient has a room big enough for their families and medical staff.
Those rooms are also wired so doctors from Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City can assess the patients here in Billings so they can potentially avoid leaving the state. That $3.2 million project was funded through the St. Vincent Healthcare Foundation.
Coming up on tonight's 10 o'clock news, it's a bill to increase wireless opportunities in rural Montana, but some opposition is keeping things tied down.
Plus, some dramatic video from a quicksand rescue out of Utah. We'll show you the scene and talk to the hiker.
And later in sports, Scott hears from Laurel's basketball girls, your top seed at tomorrow's Super Divisional.
You're watching MTN News with Jeanelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Breen. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.